Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and boy have I got a treat for you today, and that is that we're going to be looking at a brand new vehicle. This is the Ranked Battles Reward. It is the Kampfpanzer 50T. It's a tier 9 reward German medium tank, as if, the emblem on the side wasn't really clear enough. And this one's a really interesting one. It's kind of a cross between an E50 and a Leopard Prototype. And if that hasn't got your interest, I don't think too much will. Firstly, let's take a quick look at the model of this vehicle. One thing that's interesting is that this isn't a style. This is actually just the base look of the Kampfpanzer. And so if you're interested, you can apply any additional style to this vehicle that you want. For example, let's put the Mark on History style on from Wargaming's new Battle Pass, and it kind of blends very nicely in with all of the extra features that you have on the vehicle. And so I think this one looks rather fetching indeed. But look, looks aren't everything. The statistics of this tank definitely matter as to how it's going to perform on the battlefield. So just quickly, before we see how this vehicle stacks up compared to its standard counterpart, the Leopard Prototype, I'd just like to highlight that this vehicle has a crew that is perfect for the Leopard 1. And so if you have the tier 10 German medium tank, best sniping medium tank in the game, then look no further than this vehicle for crew training them up. They work perfectly with the commander having situational awareness and recon, and the playstyles, as we're going to see, they're different, but they'll be familiar to you. So let's see how the Kampfpanzer 50T stacks up compared to the other two tech tree German medium tanks, the Leopard Prototype and the E50. I'm not going to be really comparing this one to the T-55A because really that's just a Soviet tank that's cosplaying inside the German tech tree. This is a true German tank, and you're going to see why in just a second. So firstly, let's take a look at the damage per minute that the Kampfpanzer 50T has. It's 2,285. Not too bad, although it is significantly less than the Leopard, with over 100, well, nearly 100 more, and massively less than the E50, which is packing 150 more. However, the penetration on this vehicle is lovely at 268, very much like the other tier 10 medium tank guns. Not like the best sniping gun on the Leopard, though, with its 278mm of standard penetration. One thing you'll notice is that, wow, this alpha damage looks interesting. While it has the same 105mm, as we can clearly see, not all 105mm are equal. The Kampfpanzer has 320 alpha damage, which is much lower than the 390 on the E50, and much lower, 100, lower than the Leopard Prototype at 420, which is one of the special things about those two top-tier Leopard tanks. The Kampfpanzer gets APCR as standard with 1,478 meters a second shell velocity, and it gets a slightly weaker heat round, actually. 1,173 meters a second shell velocity is pretty nice for heat, but 310 millimeters of penetration is much worse than, for example, the Leopard Prototype, which gets 323 millimeters of APCR, and that gets 1,613 meters a second shell velocity. And so, funnily enough, you'd think that a reward vehicle, which is usually earned by a lot of gold spammers, would have really good gold to spam, but that's simply not the case here. And the Kampfpanzer should actually struggle against some of the thicker armor in the game, like on the 279E, which probably a lot of people played to be able to earn this tank, but also struggle at things like a well-angled mouse turret that other 340mm penetration heat rounds won't really struggle with. What's the high explosive rounds like on this tank? They're not very good. 53mm of pen and 420 alpha damage. Those definitely don't stack up compared to the big boy 510 alpha, 105mm rounds, or penetration, high explosive rounds that you have on the Leopard Prototype. All right, so let's move along. Let's take a look to see how much ammunition this tank carries. 50 rounds. That's much less than the Leopard. And the potential damage of 16,000 means that you might actually start to run out if you want to take a lot of APCR and heat rounds in this tank, depending on the matchup. Okay, so now onto the gun handling of the Kampfpanzer. 2 seconds aim time. Worse than the Leopard, but better than the E50. Accuracy at 0.33. No one would ever claim that 0.33 accuracy was bad inside World of Tanks. Unless you're a German tank lover, right? Leopard Prototype 0.31, E50 0.3. That makes the Kampfpanzer look like the inaccurate vehicle. But don't worry, it's still a great accuracy, and you will do fantastically well with this compared to the majority of other tanks inside the game. So now onto the dispersion values. When moving, it's the same as the Leopard, but worse turret reverse dispersion and massively worse dispersion values than the E50, which is one of the reasons why the E50 just feels so nice. It's just so darn snappy. You can shoot on the move more accurately in the E50, and you can do way, way, way better. We're talking about the Kampfpanzer having 50% worse dispersion when moving the turret than the E50. So now onto the depression angles, 8 degrees, standard across the board here. And the elevation at 17, it's not really super limited, but it is a little bit worse than the other two tanks. So mobility of the Kampfpanzer, what do we got here? 60 forwards, 20 backwards. Very similar to the E50, but the power to weight ratio of this vehicle is right in the middle of the two. The E50 fairly sluggish at just over 14. the Leopard springing it around at nearly 20.5 power to weight. However, the Kampfpanzer 18, yeah, smack bang in the middle. It's not the fastest medium tank, but it's definitely not a sluggish medium tank either. And weighing 50 tons, you're probably not going to want to ram one of these. And this thing will also do very well at ramming its opponents, as we're going to see in a second when we check out the armor. Alright, so ground resistance is exactly the same as the Leopard Prototype, and considering the vehicle has 38 degrees a second tank traverse, while it will do better than the E50 on all terrains apart from hard, it's way behind the Leopard Prototype, and so don't expect this thing to be rather rapid, or shall I say dynamic, as Wargaming loves to say, with the mobility of this vehicle. But now on to the armor of this tank, and this is what it's about, boys and girls. So far we found out the the Kampfpanzer has probably the worst gun, I'd say, out of any of these vehicles, with the DPM and the gun handling looked at. Its mobility is right in the middle of the Leopard and the E50, but to have this kind of armor combined along with it, ooh, it looks delicious. 120mm of frontal hull armor, but very bad side armor. Not incredibly bad, but 40 bad. What this means is that while the Leopard Prototype can side scrape against 105mm caliber guns, the Kampfpanzer can actually side scrape against 120mm caliber guns at 40. Oh, what a big difference there is between 35 and 40mm. It is significant, but it's definitely not going to side scrape as well as the E50 with its 80mm of side armor. The turret as well is a very interesting one. 250 on the front, 40 at the side. Wow, talk about stacking all of your armor towards the front of the vehicle. And thankfully, the Awesome Tanks GG website seems to have put some effort in with getting their armor models working again, and boy do they work. Let's take a look at this. So the lower plate of this tank is a really poor 110. It's not very angled. The upper plate, however, is 120, and look how well angled it is. That looks like the beak of an IS-3, and we all know how well that armor works. There's a plate up here that's 60mm, but again, it's so well angled that nothing's going to be overmatching this apart from rounds, AP rounds to be exact, from the FV 4005 or the FV215 B183. All right, the side armor 40 and 40. So imagine like a Progetto, basically, the Progetto 65. It's going to be able to bounce all 120mm caliber guns if you side scrape in a vehicle like this. And that angling off the upper hull means that you can over angle it and pull off some miracle bounces against your opponent. But just look at this turret armor. This is as if you were getting shot by the Kampfpanzer 50T with 268mm of penetration. The turret just takes it most of the time. It is a little bit weaker towards the right of the gun when you're facing it, and also on top of the turret, because holy moly, this thing doesn't look like it's symmetrical. It actually looks like it's quite lopsided. Probably for where the commander would be sitting here on the vehicle. Absolutely bizarre, right? Has a freaky kind of mini turret on the back as well. And no, this is not just an issue with the Tanks GG website. A closer inspection of the armor model in the game. Whoa, this is a weird one. That mini turret on the back, probably some kind of anti-aircraft gun. Interesting one, right? But yeah, that's going to prove to be a pretty big weak point on this side. But all in all, just how solid is this turret armor? It will auto ricochet all rounds apart from tier 10 gold rounds off the side. And you've got a blooming good chance, even against 268mm of penetration off your turret armor. Look at the lower plate though, pretty bad. But look at that upper hull, 250 effective. Now imagine you're using the 8 degrees of gun depression this tank has. Oh boy. Yeah, you know what I'm thinking, boys and girls. Oh my lord, this looks like a delicious tank to be playing against your tier 7 and tier 8 opponents. And even if somebody was to load the heat and have 310mm of penetration, it's still bouncing off the vast majority of this tank. But on the other hand, yeah, the side armor on this vehicle is absolutely abysmal. At the back of the turret, it's 40mm thick. On top, you're going to get overmatched by 91mm caliber guns, and all artillery will be doing that to you as well. And at the back, it's only got 20mm of protection. And so my top tip, if you see these out on the battlefield, get round the back, load HE, you are going to devastate this tank. But what an absolute performer. To have a vehicle that is so much in between the E50 and the Leopard Prototype. Looks like this thing could be a real powerhouse on the battlefield given the right situation. Hit points wise, 1,750, nothing to write home about here. Fire chance on the engine, 12%, way better than the E50, but not quite as good as the Leopard Prototype. And 400 meters view range means that you will be able to spot your opponents at decent distances, and considering it's a reward vehicle, I sincerely hope that you've got a good German medium tank crew to go inside this tank. Hopefully the Leopard 1 if you want to have situational awareness and recon on your commander. But you know what? I think that's quite enough jibber jabber. I'm really excited to play this one. So here we go. Let's roll out in the Kampfpanzer 50T, and you can see I was taking a look at the vehicle there. I think this is a very fetching looking tank. I love the default style, and I love well, not the star really, the 3D model that the vehicle has. And I also like the fact that you can add your different styles and camouflage on top of it. Wargaming definitely making big leaps and bounds with the customization that you can have on the vehicle. All right, so let's get an idea of the mobility of the Kampfpanzer here. Fast, right? 46. Definitely not as fast as I would be going if I was in a Leopard Prototype right now. But this is not a slouch. It's quick. You're able to get around. 50 kilometers an hour is a very healthy amount. You're going to get there before any heavy tank in the game. And considering that you have heavy tank-esque armor over the front of the vehicle, sorry to make you sick there a little bit, looks like I was trying out my FPS. Or maybe my mouse was just causing me a bit of issues there as I was playing this one off stream. So it'll be never seen before gameplay, which is always exciting. Alright, IS-22. Yeah, pretty good aim time. Not the best, but not the worst, right? I think that's what this vehicle is all about. It's a bit of an all-rounder. And I want to poke forwards. I want to be a little bit cheeky. Alright, don't know how I bounced off the RU-251 there. Maybe I missed the hull and I hit the tracks, but because of the low alpha damage or low gun caliber, we were unable to take the tracks off. Alright, there's a T-44 who's wanting to push above me, doesn't fully commit. The thing is I'm feeling so safe right now. If I was in a Leopard Prototype, I would never be doing this. I would never be doing this in a Leopard Prototype. Sitting in front of tanks trying to harass them. You're sure you've got the 8 degrees of gun depression in the Leopard Prototype, but you don't have the turret armor to ever be able to do this. So I'm just sitting in front of these tier 9 light tanks, tier 9 medium tanks, tier 8 medium tanks, just feeling so confident right now. It was a real beautiful experience to be playing a German medium tank and to feel like you can just sit in front of people. But sit in front of people but still be punished. If you give up your side armor against a T10 like that, you're in a lot of trouble. And remember, this tank, as I said, has 40 millimeters of side armor all along, and so his 122 millimeter caliber gun will overmatch my tank every single time. If you drive a little bit slowly in this vehicle and you kind of just use your R key to go forwards, your aim time barely blooms out. While it doesn't have quite as good dispersion values as we can see, with an excellent crew and also using a premium consumable like chocolate, the aim time in this tank and the gun handling is rather snazzy. One thing that isn't snazzy, however, is how Wargaming models some of their ridge lines, and yeah, I lose so many credits to ridge lines and so many lost opportunities to be able to land shells on my opponents. Always one of the most frustrating things. One thing that's a bit frustrating is that RU is going back to the garage rather quickly. Nice stuff. Now there's a mill too. Hopefully we can manage to catch him in the back of the tracks, and that's what German accuracy is all about. 0.33 accuracy. Love this. And also, I quite like the rate of fire that this tank has. If I was using the Leopard Prototype, I wouldn't be able to keep that Emil-2's tracks off. Cool, QuickyBaby. I guess cool guys do look at fires after all, or shall I say cool guys don't look at fires, but I'm not pretending to be a cool guy, so that's why I was staring. I was just making sure that he wasn't going to put the fire out so that I couldn't manage to shut down the Emil-2. And now this Emil-1 is going to be pushing out in front of me. And right now, this is where I'd be in panic stations if I was playing in the Leopard, because I'd be expecting the Emil to turn around and engage me. But luckily, the Emil doesn't focus on me there, and I'm going to manually aim into the T-44. I'm going to try and get my side armor back round against him. Looks like this thing has a vulnerable ammo rack, however, but this is where I'm feeling good. Now I've got front. Look at this, I'm actually ramming and pushing back a T-44. I bounce the T-44, but I take a round from the T-10. That's all right. I've still got 400 hit points left. As long as the T-10 doesn't hit me again, that's perfectly fine. But how good did that feel? To be in something which is fairly fast, very vulnerable from the sides, but to catch that Soviet medium tank in the front, that's how it feels, right? That's how it feels when a Soviet tank is pushing you around. It's quite nice to be doing that in the German tank, as it should be, and how it used to be in vehicles like the E-50 before gold rounds would just go through its turret left, right, and center. I'm not saying that the E-50 wouldn't be able to push the T-44 away, and it's only the Kampfpanzer could do that. That's definitely not the case. If I was in an E-50 there, I'd be tearing it up as well. Alright, so we're going to snap one into the AMX-30, turn my attention to the T-92, and while I'm a little bit worried about the IS-22 that might be towards our east, right now I just want to hunt. We're up to 4,700 damage in the first 4.5 minutes of this battle. This thing is performing. We're going to slide around the corner a little bit, get our 8 degrees of gun depression into position, snap one into the AMX-30 turret. If I'd fired a heat round there, it probably would have gone in, but I'm more worried about this T-92 trying to flank us, so why don't we push them off? Not worry about them. The AMX-30 gets shut down. And now it's just about trying to hunt down the IS-22, who actually spotted, who must have gone up towards the northeast of the corner, or the Progetto that is just hanging around in the center. Boy, oh boy. Can you tell that I'm quite liking this tank so far? And I can't wait to be able to get this as a ranked reward this season. Yeah, do I think that the vehicle's crazy OP? I think statistically the tank does feel a little bit strong at the moment, but is it that much better than an E50 or a Leopard Prototype? I'm not so sure. I think it's just a fantastic mix of statistics. I think that's what this tank is all about. The fact that I can just sit out there and I don't have to worry that every single shot I take is going to be the end of me is wonderful. But I'm still vulnerable, right? If we manage to expose our lower plate, as we just did in that situation there, we're in trouble. But we hide our lower plate and we're strong again. This thing is just a complete mix between an E50 and a Leopard Prototype. And I can tell you those are two tier 9 tanks which I like inside the game. So, yeah, it's a bit of a no-brainer that the Kampfpanzer, I keep calling it a Kanonen Jagdpanzer or whatever, the Kampfpanzer 50T is also a bit of a performer. So my team venture forth, they shut down the Progetto. I'm just hoping that we can manage to catch this T10 at the end of the game, but unfortunately for me, my team decides to cap. What are you doing, buddy? Why are you trying to cap as I try to sneak in an extra round against the T10? What a round, right? Yeah, I'll take that any day of the week, trust me. A Spartan medal for ricocheting an opponent with less than 10% of our hit points remaining, a Confederate medal for damaging 6 of our opponents that were subsequently killed by our allies, and a high caliber medal as well for 6,600 damage within 6 minutes of the game. Also, pat on the back, free to play QuickyBaby, although this is my pay to win account and I was using a pay to win consumable for not firing any gold rounds, and in a matchup like this 268mm of penetration is more than enough. If I had fired some heat here and there, maybe against the T10 or specifically against the MX30, maybe we would have added to the tally a little bit, but nah, I don't think we really needed to, and I was fine with this result. With 1,541 base experience, this will be an ace tanker any day of the week in any tank inside the game. So the Kampfpanzer 50T, a preview of the tank. What do I think about it? I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's a joy to play a German tank that actually has some turret armor and some upper hull armor, but has an awful lower plate and tragic side armor and a huge rear weakness to high explosive rounds. The gun is definitely not 10 out of 10. The Leopard Prototype's gun is clearly better. I'd say the E50's gun, if you're willing to dab the 2 key and fire a lot of gold, is also probably better. The vehicle doesn't have the best mobility, and it certainly doesn't have the best gun handling. But to be able to sacrifice a little bit of that to be able to gain that upper hull protection allows you to sit in front of tanks that otherwise you couldn't. And inside a matchup like this, where you're against tier 8s and tier 9s, let alone if you're playing against tier 7s, I think this tank is an absolute beast. Add to that the mobility, and I'm thinking that this tank, statistically, is it a little bit overpowered? It's really hard for me to tell. It's hard for me to play a tank and think about how the majority of players are going to play in it. All I know is that this tank is going to be given to the better players or the most dedicated players who have played tier 10 tanks to be able to smash through ranked battles. And they've managed to get, I think it's silver in every season, or they've managed to get gold in one of the seasons. I don't know. I think you have to get 10 total points to be able to get this tank. So you've definitely had to play all 3 ranked campaigns, episodes, whatever you want to call them. And I think it's always very dangerous to give a very powerful tank to the better players of World of Tanks, because it's probably better if you kind of give the best players a slightly worse tank than the average, because the best players don't need an advantage against their opponents. I'm going to hold back that judgment until more people are playing the tank and the NDA of the vehicle is over, so I can finally play it on stream and rack up a few more games inside the tank. All I can tell you is that I know that I'm going to love this vehicle. It's got enough mobility, it's got enough penetration on the gun, it's got enough gun handling, and it's got that upper hull armor that I can use. Not all-round armor, not all-round OP armor on something like a 279E, but enough frontal armor to be able to outplay some of those more tricky, annoying low-tier tanks that vehicles like the Leopard Prototype just have to shed their hit points to. I'm really going to enjoy this one. So, is it worth investing time in the 3rd season of ranked battles to be able to get it? Well, the first thing that you've got to realize is that you will not get the Kampfpanzer unless you can get 10 tokens. So, if you're able to get 10 tokens, I thoroughly recommend you put the time in ranked battles to be able to get this tank, because it's a reward that you're not going to want to miss out on. However, for all of you out there who absolutely hate ranked battles, I'm going to give you my top tips for being able to take this thing out effectively on the battlefield. Well, number 1, its alpha damage is really low. 320 alpha damage means that it's more likely than not that you are going to have higher alpha damage than this tank does. And so outtrade it. Don't let this thing put multiple rounds into you trade a shot, then pull back, and eventually you're going to be able to whittle it down. Also, take advantage of this thing's absolutely tragic lower plate. If you've got 158mm of penetration, you're going to be able to handle it. If it overangles, obliterate it, sidetrack, lock it down, and then try to advance into a position where maybe you can even fire high explosive rounds at it. Is this thing sitting hull down against you just because it's kind of a little bit like a Leopard Prototype doesn't mean that you can disrespect the tank. If it's sitting hull down and you can't see its lower plate, don't feed it. You're probably best to just fire high explosive rounds, and I'd recommend to try and splash high explosive rounds over the turret ring, or maybe even fire high explosive rounds over this kind of viewport here. It's going to splash over that 60mm of armor and you'll be okay. Another point that's very interesting about this vehicle, it's kind of got this viewport that's sitting up here. It looks like it has some space protection over it because I haven't been able to shoot at one of these, haven't really been able to test that out. But it looks like it could be a bit of a weak point as it has 200mm of effective armor. So if you're aiming at the tank, that could be a weak point that you could engage. Although it's quite a tricky one to be able to hit if it's moving backwards and forwards, but if it's sitting completely dead still, maybe you can make the most of that. The other ways that I would recommend taking on one of these vehicles is the fact that its damage per minute is rather low. If you can just all in the tank and you've got enough armor to be able to occasionally bounce it, or let's say you're an autoloader, yeah, you could go in and probably be able to devastate this thing before it's going to put too much damage into you. Also, if you're a heavy tank, keep in mind that this thing has a 105mm caliber gun. It's quite unlikely that it's going to be able to lock down your tracks multiple times if you have a repair kit, so don't be too afraid to blitz around the corner. It's not very likely that it's going to take your tracks off with a single hit, although it could happen. It's probably going to be about a 50-50 whether it takes your tracks off with a single hit, but if you've got a repair kit, it might have to shoot your tracks 2 times to be able to take them off, and if you can make it so that they can't damage you and also track you at the same time, I think that will give you a fairly good chance. And so, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was the Kampfpanzer 50T. Definitely a tank that I'm excited to be able to play on stream now that the NDA is up. And hopefully you enjoyed this video, the preview of the tank. Maybe it was just useful to you, or if you did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up. Really helps the channel out, or give it a thumbs down if you hated the video so I can know your feedback. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Kampfpanzer 50T. Do you think that it looks like a completely overpowered tank to be giving to the more dedicated and better players who have been achieving great ranks inside the ranked battles game mode? Or do you think that it looks like a German tank done right and you wish there was a vehicle that everybody could be able to get that was like this and outside of the ranked battles? And also, are you going to be getting one yourself? Have you been performing in the ranked battles well enough, or are you going to just miss the mark? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.